It's a moonless night in the Kalahari 12,000 years ago. A woman lies awake beside her husband, waiting for his breathing to go slow and even. When it does, she rises, steps over the warm ashes of the fire, and walks out into the dark. Here's the first strange thing. She isn't afraid of being caught. She crosses the cold sand to the far edge of camp, where a man sits waiting beside a low fire, and he is not her husband. He's the man she loved first, years before her family arranged the marriage she just slipped out of. They never really stopped. And here is the part built to break a modern brain. Her husband knows. Most of the camp knows. No one calls it betrayal because her people have a name for what these two are to each other, and it lands far closer to a small marriage than to an affair. Two marriages running side by side out in the open. She walks at night, not because she's hiding from punishment, but out of a kind of courtesy. The bond is allowed to be known, as long as it's never rubbed in anyone's face. She isn't running from her family. By the older rules of her world, she's keeping a promise that predates her wedding. Hold that picture because it should feel impossible. Almost everything you assume about love, that it comes with a wedding and a document, a single name beside yours and a wall around the two of you that no one else may cross, is younger than farming. It's younger than writing. For the vast majority of the time, there have been humans. There were no priests, no paperwork, no rings. So what was left? What did love, sex, and partnership actually look like before any of that existed? That's the question. And the honest answer is stranger, warmer, and a lot more complicated than either side of the argument wants it to be. We tend to picture ancient humans in one of two cartoons. Either they're brutes, a man drags a woman by the hair into a cave, and that's marriage. Or they're noble innocents living in some free love paradise where nobody was jealous and everybody shared everything, including each other. Both pictures are wrong, and both are wrong in the same way. They treat ancient people as simpler than us. They weren't simpler. Their arrangements were, if anything, more intricate than ours. Here's the problem we have to deal with up front, because the whole video depends on it. We can't interview a Paleolithic human. Nobody filmed a Stone Age courtship. So how does anyone claim to know any of this? The answer is that for over a century, anthropologists have lived alongside the last societies on Earth who still fed themselves mostly by hunting and gathering. The Hadza of Tanzania, the hoansi of the Kalahari, the Aché of Paraguay, the Barí of Venezuela. The reasoning goes, if you want a hint of how humans lived before farms and cities, watch the people who, until very recently, lived without them. But, and hold on to this, because we'll come back to it, that reasoning has a crack in it. These are not living fossils. They're modern people with their own long histories, their own changes, their own run-ins with empires and missionaries and markets. Using them as a window into the deep past is less like watching a documentary and more like reading a translation of a translation. So everything that follows is an educated inference, not a recording. Keep that caveat lit in the back of your mind. We're going to need it at the end. With that said, let's start with the most basic question of all. Did ancient humans feel romantic love? Or is that ache in your chest, the obsession, the can't eat, can't sleep, the one face you keep seeing? Is that just a modern luxury invented by poets and pop songs? In 1992, two anthropologists, William Jankowiak and Edward Fisher, decided to actually check. They took a standard sample of 166 cultures from around the world and went looking for hard evidence of romantic love in each one. Not marriage, not sex, but longing. Love songs, stories of couples running away together against their family's wishes. Accounts of heartbreak, people pining for someone they couldn't have. They found it in 147 of those 166 societies, nearly 9 in 10. And the cases where they didn't find it were mostly cases where no ethnographer had ever bothered to ask. Not cases where love was absent. That was a quiet bombshell. Romantic love wasn't a European invention exported to the rest of the world. It looked like a basic feature of being human. And then the brain scanners arrived. The anthropologist Helen Fisher, working with Arthur Aaron and Lucy Brown, put people who were freshly, helplessly in love into an fMRI machine. Just 17 of them, so hold the result loosely, and showed each one a photo of the person they were crazy about. The same region lit up every time. A deep, ancient part of the brain that runs on dopamine. Not the part that handles emotion exactly. The part that handles wanting, craving, motivation. The same circuitry that drives you toward food when you're starving. Now, you've probably heard people say this means love lights up your brain like cocaine. Be careful with that line. It's a study of 17 people at one fizzy early stage, and the scientists themselves were more cautious than the headlines. But the core finding holds, and it's beautiful in its own way. Early love isn't really an emotion, it's a drive, a goal. Your brain treats another human being as something it needs to go get. That machinery is old, far older than weddings. The woman slipping out into the Kalahari dark was running on the exact same circuit you are, so the feeling is ancient. The question is what they built on top of it. Picture the practical problem. You live in a band of maybe 30 people. You've known everyone your whole life. A good number of them are your blood relatives. So where exactly are you supposed to find someone to fall for? The answer was that forager bands didn't stay sealed off from each other. They breathed in and out. For much of the year, people spread thin across the land in small camps, but at certain seasons, when the rains filled a particular waterhole, when a stretch of country came ripe with food, separate bands would converge. Suddenly, a quiet camp of 30 became a gathering of 150. New faces, distant cousins, strangers, and these gatherings were not just about water. They were charged. There was dancing that went all night, grant ceremonies, feasting, gift-giving. In the Kalahari, people carried beads, delicate discs cut from ostrich eggshell, and exchanged them through a system called aksaro, a web of gift partnerships that tied people together across enormous distances. We know from chemical analysis of beads found in Lesotho that these exchange networks stretched hundreds of kilometers, and that they're old, at least 33,000 years old. Think about what that means. The necklace a young woman wore to a dance might have started its journey a week's walk away. People wore their connections on their skin. So you arrive at the gathering. You're wearing ochre on your skin and beadwork that signals who you're tied to. There's firelight and music and people you've never met. If that sounds like every courtship ritual humans have ever invented, a festival, a dance, a chance to be seen, that's because it probably is the original version. We didn't invent the dance floor, we inherited it. Say it works, say two people want to be together. What happens next? Here's where it gets genuinely strange to modern eyes, because the answer is almost nothing happens. There's no ceremony. Frank Marlowe spent years with the Hadza of Tanzania and wrote the definitive account of their lives. Among the Hadza, marriage is not arranged. There's no wedding, no officiant, no vows, no party where two families sign anything. A couple who've been quietly courting simply begin sleeping in the same place. They start sharing a fire, sharing food. And that's it. That's the marriage. The community recognizes it not because of a ritual, but because everyone can see that these two are now a household. A man is expected to provide, to bring meat, to provision his partner and her family, to prove he's worth having around. But the bond itself is marked by daily life, not by a document. And because there's no paperwork holding it shut, there's no paperwork to undo. Divorce is just as quiet as marriage. If it isn't working, one person stops sharing the fire. She goes back to her own kin or moves in with someone else. He does the same. There's no court, no stigma, no shattering. Partnerships form and dissolve and reform across a lifetime. Anthropologists have a phrase for this pattern: serial monogamy. One partner at a time, but not necessarily one partner forever. If that sounds familiar, and if that sounds a lot like modern dating, modern marriage, modern divorce, minus the lawyers, then you're starting to see the punchline that's coming. We did not invent any of this either. But hold on. You may have heard that most human societies allow a man to have multiple wives. That polygamy, not monogamy, is the human default. And there's a real number behind that claim. When the anthropologist George Murdoch coded hundreds of the world's societies, around 85% of them permitted some form of polygyny. One man, multiple wives. 85% sounds enormous. But notice the word permitted. Permitted is not the same as practiced. A society can allow something that almost nobody actually does. And when Marlowe looked specifically at forager societies and counted, the share of married men who actually had more than one wife at a time was small, on average around 12%, and in many groups close to zero. Among the Hadza, polygyny is rare. Why? Because in a band where everyone hunts and gathers and nobody can hoard wealth, a man simply can't accumulate enough power to support and hold on to multiple wives. There's no surplus to convert into status. There are exceptions, and they're dramatic. The Tiwi of Northern Australia are famous in anthropology for a system where powerful older men accumulated many wives, while young men waited years and years for their first. Though even here, the careful researchers tell us to be skeptical of the most extreme retellings. But the exception proves the pattern. Where someone could concentrate power, polygyny bloomed. Where nobody could, which describes most of the deep past, it stayed rare. The lived reality for most ancient people, most of the time, was not a harem. It was one person at a time, with the freedom to change your mind. Which brings us back to that woman crossing the cold sand toward the man she loved first. Because one partner at a time was only ever the public story. The private story had layers. Marjorie Shostak spent years with a Jew hoansi woman she called Nisa and recorded her entire life in her own words: her marriages, her divorces, her children, and her lovers. Not lovers in the past tense, idly before marriage, lovers during. Nisa described taking partners outside her marriage who lasted for years, and she wasn't a scandal. Among her people, long-term extramarital relationships were common, often an open secret, known to the community, even to the spouse, but not flaunted, not named out loud. There's a label sometimes attached to this, the idea of a small marriage running quietly alongside the big one, and we should be honest that the exact term is debated, and you'd want to check it against Shostak's own words before carving it in stone. But the underlying reality is solid. These societies did not pretend that one marriage erased all other desire. They built quiet room for it, a second bond that everyone could see in soft focus and chose not to stare at directly. It's easy to romanticize that. Don't yet, because we haven't gotten to the most radical idea of all, the one that takes this web of relationships and does something with it that should be biologically impossible. In a lot of lowland South America, among the Barí of Venezuela, the Canila and Mehinaku of Brazil, and others, people believed something that sounds to us simply wrong. They believed a baby is not made once. They believed a fetus is built up gradually over the months of pregnancy from the contributions of every man the mother sleeps with during that time. Many men, one child. Not metaphorically, literally. Each man, a co-author of the baby's body. Anthropologists call this partible paternity, paternity that can be divided. And it wasn't a shameful loophole, it was the system. A pregnant woman might take a secondary partner, and often deliberately. And when the child was born, those secondary fathers were publicly named, acknowledged, and crucially, obligated. A man named as a co-father was expected to bring meat, to protect, to provide for that child for years. Now ask the obvious question. Did it actually help the kid? Stephen Beckerman went and looked at the Barí data, and the answer appears to be yes. Children with a recognized secondary father, a second man on the hook to feed and protect them, were meaningfully more likely to survive to age 15 than children with only one. You'll see various figures thrown around for exactly how much more likely, and the cleanest version of the finding is more careful than the dramatic ones, so I won't hand you a fake precise number. But the direction is real. In a dangerous world, a backup father was life insurance. Among the Canela, one ethnographer reported that virtually every child had several fathers. This wasn't the exception. In those societies, it was simply how you made a child safe. Sit with how upside down that is. A second lover wasn't a threat to the family. A second lover was another adult bound by name and honor to keep your child alive. The affair and the family were not enemies. Sometimes they were the same project. And here's where I have to stop you and stop myself before this turns into a fairy tale. Because there's a version of this story that's been told 1,000 times online. The ancient free love paradise. No jealousy, no possessiveness, everybody serenely sharing. That version is a lie, and the same anthropologists who gave us everything above are the ones who prove it's a lie. Go back to the Hadza, the same easygoing, low-ceremony serial monogamy Hadza. When researchers looked at the killings within that society, the murders of Hadza by other Hadza, a chilling pattern emerged. They traced, again and again, the sexual jealousy. Two men wanting the same woman, a betrayal avenged. The gentlest marriage system on our list still had blood in it. And this isn't unique to one group. Researchers like Martin Daly and Margot Wilson have shown that across wildly different human societies, sexual jealousy is one of the great engines of murder. Everywhere, in every subsistence mode, it is one of the most reliably dangerous emotions our species owns. Ancient people felt it as hot as we do, sometimes hotter. Oh no, it wasn't paradise, it was people. Loving, scheming, aching, raging people, building arrangements that mostly worked and sometimes ended in a spear. And now the second confession, the big one I asked you to hold from the beginning. Every single society I've named you, the Hadza, the hoansi, the Barí, is a living modern people, not a fossil. They have phones now, or borders, or missionaries in their history, or all three. When I say this is how ancient humans loved, what I really mean is, this is the range of ways humans can love when they live in small groups off the land. And from that range, we infer. We are reading smoke to guess at a fire we'll never actually see. Anyone who tells you they know exactly how a Paleolithic couple felt is selling you something. The honest position is humility. So if we can't be sure of the marriages, or the lovers, or the rules, is there anything underneath all of it that we can actually trust? There is, and it's the part nobody puts in the thumbnail. Here's the announcement I promised you. Through all of it, the no wedding marriages, the secret lovers, the children with many fathers, the jealousy, the inference, and the doubt, there is one thing the evidence keeps pointing at, steady as a heartbeat, and it has almost nothing to do with who slept with whom. It's this. Ancient children were never raised by two people. They were raised by a crowd. The anthropologist Sarah Blaffer-Hrdy gave this its name, cooperative breeding. Humans are bizarre among mammals. In almost every other species, a mother raises her young essentially alone, and an infant handled by strangers is an infant in danger. Not us. We are one of the rare animals where the group raises the child, where aunts, grandmothers, older siblings, co-fathers, friends, and near strangers all carry, feed, and guard a baby that isn't biologically theirs. Hrdy argues this is a deep secret of our species. Human mothers could only afford to have children so close together and raise such slow, needy, big-brained babies because they were never doing it by themselves. Watch it happen in real time, and the numbers are startling. Among the Hadza, researchers found that a single child receives hands-on care from an average of more than 2 other caregivers beyond the mother. Alla mothers, they're called other mothers, hand the baby off, and the mother is freed to forage, to feed herself, to recover, to live. A Hadza infant passes through many arms in a single day. It is held, comforted, and fed by a whole social web, and it is safe there. Now line it all up. The marriage with no wedding, the serial partners, the quiet long-term lover, the child with a backup father. Every one of those arrangements, however strange it looks to us, was a different way of doing the same fundamental thing, widening the circle of adults responsible for a child. More bonds, more fathers, more hands. The specific rules varied wildly from group to group. The underlying goal never did. Surround the child. Never let 1 or 2 people carry it alone. And that, not monogamy, not polygamy, not the affair or the ring. That is the thing modern life quietly deleted. We didn't lose marriage. We'll have it. We lost the crowd. We took the child out of the web of 50 hands and handed it to one exhausted couple in a closed apartment, called that normal. It is, by the standard of our entire species' history, deeply abnormal. The loneliest part of modern parenting isn't a feeling. It's an accurate measurement of what's missing. So go back one last time to that woman crossing the cold sand on a moonless night, toward the man she loved first. We started by asking what she was doing out there, whether she was betraying her husband, breaking her family, chasing something selfish in the dark. Maybe a part of her was. People are people, and we've seen that jealousy never truly left anyone. But look at her now, with everything you know. The man waiting beside that low fire may be bound, by name, by honor, by a child still to come, to help keep her family fed. Her marriage will survive the night. Her people built it to. And when her next child is born, it will wake each morning and be passed from her arms to a grandmother's, to an aunt's, into the hands of half the camp, held by a dozen people who will all in their own way call it theirs. She wasn't escaping her family out there in the dark. She was widening the circle. She was part of something most of us have never felt, a way of loving where no one, not the mother, not the child, not even the man across the fire, was ever truly carrying it alone. We're the ones alone. We just got so used to it we started calling it love.